Hey guys, welcome back. If you are anything like me and you like African violets, you grow African violets, at some point in your plant journey, I'm pretty sure most of you have come across root rot, stem rot, or crown rot. It's very common with African violets, especially if the soil mixture you're using is not well draining and aerated. Also, if you water them too often, or if you water from above and the crown stays wet for too long. One solution that I use for these violets, or these violets that are going through this trauma, is I take them out of the soil, I clean them up, and I put them into water culture. And by water culture, I mean full water culture, always exposed to water in a vessel. So one example of a recent rot problem that I've had was with this violet here. You can see it's missing most of its crown. What ended up happening is it was watered from above too often and it stayed wet. The crown rotted out. I had to clean out the crown and wait for some new growth beside one of the leaves. And the stem was completely rotted out at the very base. Most of the roots were rotted, so I cleared them all off and put it in water culture. And as you can see, we've got some new roots. It's been about a week and a half, and it's doing much better. You can see the crown is starting to grow back. We've got little baby leaves in there. You can see how bad the old leaves look. They're not just old, they're discolored. Very unhappy plant. So one thing that speeds up this process to rejuvenate your plant, aside from putting it into the water culture, is keeping it in a nice warm spot and underneath grow lights. I keep it very close to the light so it can make as much food for itself as possible. So yeah, one thing that you can do after you get roots that are long enough and a crown that looks strong and sturdy with enough leaves, you can either transfer it into a well-draining soil mix, especially one that's made for African violets, or you can leave it in water culture. I prefer to leave these in water culture. Water culture is so much easier. You never have to worry about forgetting to water them. You never have to worry about watering them too much. And my violets in water culture tend to bloom more often, and I don't really have to go through lengths to get them to bloom as long as they have enough light. That's the one thing that I've noticed. At this stage, I won't be feeding this violet because the root system isn't strong enough and neither is the crown. So I'm going to wait for these roots to get a little bit longer before I start to feed. But yeah, they do really, really well in water culture. One thing to note is I also keep the water level well below where the leaves start on the stem, because any of two things could happen. You can either start to rot out the base of the leaves, or you could start growing roots out of the base of the leaves, which I've had happen as well. That's not the worst thing to happen. The rot is obviously what you want to try to avoid, but I prefer to keep the roots as low on the stem as possible. So yeah, that's exactly what it's all about. Very easy to do as long as you know what to do. Here's another example of one. This poor little guy had, the crown is fine, but the roots were in such bad shape. And when I received this violet, I was wondering, why are these leaves wilting? This is not, obviously this is not normal, but also the soil isn't dried out. The soil is damp. It wasn't waterlogged when I received it, but it had obviously been sitting in water for way too long. And so I chopped off the roots and I had nothing but a little green stem. And you can see in water culture, these thick, fleshy, juicy, delicious roots have been growing. Very, very happy. So happy that you can see I have 3 flower spikes forming. I'm very excited. I don't even know what color these are going to be, because when I got this violet, it wasn't in bloom, it was in bad shape. But as you can see, the root system's really supplying some moisture and food to this plant that it's so happy that it's blooming. It's also directly under a grow light. And at this stage, with roots of this size and this many roots, I do fertilize the water. I do about a quarter strength fertilizer, but I add it to the water each time I replace and flush out the vessel. But doing so much better, and I'm getting flowers, and this one is also staying in water culture. Another thing that I do as I guess a preemptive strike before there's any sort of rot is I take the violets, even if they're healthy, they seem like they're in good shape, but they're not blooming, and I want them to bloom. I want to see what the flowers look like, because chances are if I received them when they weren't in bloom, they either didn't have enough light or they just were being neglected, because the plants like to flower when they're happy. So I take the plant out of the pot, and all I do is clean off the roots. You can see that there aren't really extensive roots on African violets for the most part. But one thing that you will notice is once you clean off the roots really, really well, like I did here, you'll notice that soil roots they tend to be woody, very different from water roots. And that's true for basically all kinds of plants that you grow in water versus soil. The water roots are always more brittle, they're softer, thicker, and fleshy, while the soil roots, because they go through the wet-dry cycle, they tend to get a little bit more woody and have more substance to them. So this plant has been in water culture for, I don't know exactly how long it's been, but it has not been directly under the lights. So I don't have a flower spike starting yet. Hopefully soon I will. But you can see there are some new roots that have started. The old roots have also extended. You can't see here, but there you see one right there at the bottom. I used to think, oh, these wooden roots are dead, but I'll keep them on just so that it draws up moisture so that new roots form. I realize that isn't the truth. Those woody roots do function. They are functional roots. They're not dead. But they're just different from the water roots. And now you could see here, water root growing out of soil root. And you could see how they look so different. Anyway, this one's going back in the water. This one will stay in the water. And the leaves are nice and firm and green in a good color. And I am going to put this closer under the light now. This one is going to start getting fertilized as well. I don't want to fertilize when it just has the soil roots in water because they haven't acclimated yet. Once I start to see some water roots, then I know, okay, this plant is adjusted to being in water, so now I can start to feed. Here's yet another one. This one has, is it 2 crowns or 3? It's got 3 crowns. I guess this is some sort of trailer. This was a no ID. Really beautiful flower. It just was not doing well in soil. It's just starting to bounce back now, as you can see. And I've had this one for a couple of years, but I'm not really sure what was going on with it. But ever since I transferred it over to the water culture, the leaves started to sprout. It started to get a deeper green color. I have it under the lights as usual, but I'm pretty sure that this one's going to bounce back and do amazingly well. And I'll probably do a follow-up video so you can see the beautiful color of these flowers. But yeah, I definitely recommend water culture for African violets. It's not something that's done very often. I don't see a lot of talk about it. I've seen like semi-hydro. People put them in the leca pebbles, which I've done as well, in lava rock. But because of the nature of African violet roots, they're so tender and so fine and very fibrous. If you are repotting or removing your plant from the media, all those roots start to break off, and you kind of have to start over again and have it rebuild its root system. In the water culture, the roots very rarely get damaged unless you're careless, even if you're flushing out your vessels. So I definitely recommend water culture. I love it. I have so many violets in water culture. These are just a few examples that I could pull together quickly for this video, but many years I've had some violets just living in their water vessel, blooming, nice big full crowns, all types. You could do standards, you could do semi-miniatures, miniatures. Very, very successful method if you just follow a couple of simple rules. So I hope this was helpful to you guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. You can share this video, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit that little bell wherever that is. And I will see you in the next video.